Policing TV. I'm delighted, absolutely delighted to be joined by newly elected Norfolk Police and Crime Commissioner Sarah Taylor. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us here on Policing TV. Newly elected, so let's start by giving you the opportunity to tell us something about your background and what led you to stand as a Police and Crime Commissioner candidate.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I have a background as my professional background is in engineering. I've been a member of the Labour Party for donkey's years, a long time. So I've been active as a councillor in my local town for the last year. But professionally, my background is in road safety, and I was quite heavily involved in a relatively high profile case a few years ago associated with smart motorways. And so I'm one of, which is not uncommon to become sort of an accidental road safety specialist. And because of the work associated with the smart motorways, I've become something of a known advocate for best practice in road safety, which is around safe system, which is a proactive, preventative approach to really focus on stopping people dying and being seriously injured on our roads. And, long story short, because I work nationally, I have definitely seen a trend that in areas where there is that strong preventative focus, largely from people like the PCC, so in a leadership function, there's a very different approach taken to things like road safety rather than a classic approach that you might find elsewhere. And I've just been very curious around that. And as I was exploring that, I started to see this theme more generally. So in areas with a strong preventative focus, there tended to be quite a different approach across lots of different areas of policing. And I just thought, given my background and my observations from the outside looking in, that then developed into this sort of more sort of wider interest around criminal justice and that kind of thing. And when the call went out from the Labour Party looking for candidates, I just found myself that I thought this was the right time to go ahead and explore this in a bit more detail. So
We'll come on in a moment to your plans for your tenure in Norfolk, and we may return therefore to road safety. But before we come to that, just hear from you about your experience on the campaign trail whilst you were out and about in Norfolk. What sorts of things were members of the public telling you, areas of concern that they had? So what were you hearing when you were doing your campaigning?
yeah, I would say it's broadly chunked up into a few different themes. Number one, really by a country mile, was the feeling that people don't see bobbies on the beat anymore. And whilst that's quite a quick way of talking about that lack of visible policing presence that people were absolutely consistent in talking about, having conversations with people, it became quite clear that largely, if I'm answering the exam question, rather than just taking that completely at face value, there's something around people not feeling reassured that if something were to happen to them, they have certainty that the police response would be timely and adequate. And that there's something around the fact that Norfolk doesn't have PCSOs, for example, that has contributed to that feeling. And there's also a sense, particularly in our retail sector, I spent quite a lot of time talking with people who work on the shop floor because shoplifting has increased massively in Norfolk as elsewhere. And there was also that feeling of needing a deterrent effect of having more visible policing. So a few different things in that mix, but that sense of needing more visible presence came across very strongly. The prevention focus definitely aroused quite a lot of curiosity, and roads policing is obviously an area of policing that I would say a huge number of people probably have the most interaction with our police. So, and as you'd expect, given we all use roads, there was a lot of expertise and comments coming from the public. Just one of my Facebook posts had something like 500 comments just about a more preventative approach. That was fascinating to me. But more generally, a preventative approach that came through loud and clear. The really underpinning message, though, was one of just people not knowing what the PCC does. They do not understand the role. We know it's an obscure part of our democratic process anyway. Like, we do sort of acknowledge that. But there was a real dearth of understanding within the public in Norfolk, and people were quite clear about not really having seen the previous PCCs. And at its core, the PCC obviously has to be the voice of our communities within policing. And so fundamentally, that is what I will be looking to do going forward. So I would like to think I've run a campaign on that basis, and hopefully I can sort of continue that communicative approach with people across Norfolk going forward.
So picking up, one of the several things I'm picking up from that experience on the campaign trail is let's touch on visibility first. So you are going to be a visible, active PCC who's engaging with, in this case, the Norfolk community, is what I'm hearing. What about the other aims that you have, maybe commitments that you gave to what you would do if you were, as you have been, elected?
Mm. Yeah, so I'm just going to possibly sound like I'm dodging the question, but honestly not. One thing I should just say in terms of the campaign trail was I was really quite blown away by how many serving police officers took the time to get in touch with me. And a PCC campaign isn't really like a normal, in inverted commas, election campaign, because you don't actually have the opportunity to knock on that many doors, because Norfolk is enormous. It's a huge county. So I did do some door knocking, but not a huge amount. And it just so happened that when I was doing that sort of canvassing and talking with people on the doorstep, I happened to speak with a lot of police officers, quite a strange, disproportionately large number of them. And it was really interesting to me to hear more from the shop floor perspective, matters about really their concerns about welfare, how they feel given the press attitude towards policing, which we know. So not just things like the terrible sort of Sarah Everard case and matters coming out of the Angelini report with regards to vetting, but even just local issues really just being picked up by the press, and the feeling within the police that they were getting a bit of a kicking, basically. And when I was exploring that with them, there was a lot of discussion around the CPS requirements for sort of court-ready case files, and therefore even when there is an admission, spending a huge amount of time on the administration of those case files, which keeps people behind their desks. So what I've, working in engineering, I'm not afraid of a nuanced answer, and I've been really, I hope, quite diligent and consistent in talking about the fact that policing is just one link in the chain of our justice system. And actually, the PCC has quite a significant role to play in helping resolve some of the issues with the backlog in the courts, with the CPS, and with those relationships locally. And what I'd like to do ultimately is help resolve some of those so we can reduce the administrative burden and get more police officers doing more detection, being out in our communities more.
So let me just add a little context for those outside the United Kingdom who a typical member of Parliament, their constituency is maybe 60,000 of that order. For a police and crime commissioner, the constituency can be 200,000, 300,000, even in some cases a million. So it's a very substantial population and community to get around. Let's pick up on the criminal justice point. Then I'd like to come to PCSOs and seeing a Bobby, as I think you might have put it, and then wider. The criminal justice point. So what I'm hearing is you have a keen interest in the criminal justice system, how police are part of the process that goes from police to courts, sorry, to Crown Prosecution Service to courts and potentially onto probation and so on and so forth. You have a keen interest in that, is that right?
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to getting it more from almost like a hobbyist perspective into a more sort of professionalised and hands-on approach. Yeah.
Okay, so something like that, it's less going to be something that is inverted commas fixed just in Norfolk. It would be something that would need to be inverted commas fixed at a national level. Might this indicate that you would be interested in the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners criminal justice portfolio, because that will be reassigned in due course, uh, taking a national interest as well as a local interest in what's happening in Norfolk. Okay, so
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely. The APCC portfolio is for sure in my sights. I would love an opportunity to get involved with that. But there is definitely a really substantial role to be played locally as well. And it's great to hear some of the work that's already being done by the police. And I hope that in my more public facing role, I can start to shine a real light on some of that good work and build on that.
So let's now move on to, you mentioned police community support officers, which again, by context, is a relatively new role. It's something of the order of the last 10 years, I think. I may have it slightly wrong, where PCSOs supplement in the local community the work that police officers do. And Norfolk expanded the PCSO group a small number of years ago, where most forces and most police and crime commissioners have chosen to keep PCSOs. Um, do you think you might bring PCSOs back?
Yeah, I have a lot of sympathy with members of the public who have been really very clear about their expectation to see PCSOs back. They really did an important role being eyes and ears on the ground in our communities and provided a very vital link in the chain, again, bringing community voices into policing. And it's admirable the way that the police have tried to basically backfill that through things like safer neighbourhood area, like priority planning meetings, and then that kind of thing. And in my role as a district councillor, I can see also there's that dialogue happening. The problem from my perspective, and I think from an operational perspective as well, if I dare sort of foray into that kind of territory, is that there is a really significant barrier to delivering PCSOs in any sort of area, and that's largely to do with the Home Office funding. So there are funding pots, but they tend to be, or certainly my understanding is that recently they've been absolutely ring fence to deliver additional police officers. And so what I would love to see more of, and I shall be banging this drum loud and clear, is that we need more flexibility in the funding so that operationally kind of astute decisions can be made. I mean, I completely understand, again, why politically saying that we're going to deliver more police officers is great, and it is almost certainly useful to have more people. My concern is that it could be at a cost. I mean, ultimately, we also need new technology and we need more computers and we need good systems that work and availability, more access to good quality data to drive those kind of detection rates up further as well. Policing these days is so far away from just having policemen, in an old-fashioned sort of sense on the street. It's a different world now, and operationally there needs to be that flexibility in how the chief constable can respond to that.
There are so many points there that I'd love the opportunity to pick up with you, Sarah, but we sadly don't have time. Perhaps we can return to them on a separate occasion. But what I do want to bring this conversation to a close on is, as a newly elected Police and Crime Commissioner, you will, of course, bring strength from your previous experience, your previous knowledge, your professional life, and so on. Um, there will be aspects where you're finding your feet, and I suspect that you will be looking to your office, you'll be looking to some extent to the force, you'll be looking to partners and others to provide you with that wealth of information that you need in order to take the key decisions, including on PCSOs that you might need to make. Um, so, what sort of support do you feel as a newly elected PCC that you would welcome in your bedding yourself into this new role?
It's a rich mix of different resources needed. Yesterday was my first day. My term commenced yesterday, so I spent the full day with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner team, and they now have quite a long list of briefings that I'd like to have early doors, and they range from our mental health response in Norfolk and how we deal with people experiencing mental health crises, right care, right person, and that kind of response. I really need to understand that and the different stages of that approach. I have a keen interest, as you might expect from an engineer, in risk management, which can sound incredibly dry, but ultimately, if we're going to have an effective proactive policing response in Norfolk, then I need, as the PCC, to understand that really in a nuts and bolts way. Really, though, kind of at its core, as I learn, I think this is a great opportunity as well to help shine a light on different areas of policing for the public in Norfolk, because as I was saying, there is this great lack of understanding within the public. And so as I learn about different teams within the police force, different areas of work, hopefully I can find ways of communicating that to people who work and live in Norfolk, and just get a greater understanding of what the good work is that currently happens within our police.
Let's take the opportunity to commend to you a policing TV series of videos recorded in Humberside where Right Care, Right Person originated. So that I think you'd find quite useful. But I am now going to draw this conversation to a close, at least this specific conversation, Sarah. Thank you so much for your time. Very best wishes to you, your office, the force, and those that you work with in delivering outstanding policing in Norfolk over the 4-year term. And I look forward to, and hope and look forward to our having future conversations that see how things are going. So for the time being, Norfolk PCC Sarah Taylor, thank you so much.
Thank you.